AI is evolving at breakneck speeds with massive ramifications for businesses. It's only getting faster, and as a business owner in particular, you need to keep up. I'm a former data scientist and machine learning engineer at Meta, and I lead New York strategy where I've advised Fortune 500 companies and high growth startups on AI strategy and implementation. Our goal today is to understand the exponential pace at which AI is transforming the world and what it means for your business and how you can take advantage of it. And we're going to do so by looking at the exponential growth and impact of AI through the unique lens of cities. Let's get to it. All right, so not everybody works as a technical developer in the AI space. And quite frankly, it's very hard to keep up with everything that's happening at the breakneck speed that it's happening. So all of us either live in cities or we've been to cities. And many of us can relate to how quickly urban life is changing. And so although it's not a perfect analogy, we're going to use cities as a metaphor and also a use case for understanding the fast pace of AI development. And so let's consider that a city has multiple layers to it. It has infrastructure, it has people, it has levels of communication, and all of those things are categorically different in how they interact with one another when you're talking about a very small town, a village, compared to a bustling metropolis like New York City. And so what we want to do is we want to understand how the three stages of AI development within an individual company, or the three A's that we consider to be the primary drivers of AI implementation, work together, and how the evolution of cities as well as the evolution of AI have brought us to the point that we are today after 50 years of growth. And so what we're considering are how analytics, artificial intelligence, and automation have improved and how those things have become more accessible to businesses, organizations, governments in cities, and likewise how that reflects on the capacity that AI has to make meaningful improvements for cities, for businesses, for the world around us. And so when we're talking about the enablers of AI, we want to think about three main things: computational power, data availability, and the number of connected devices. All of them feed into one another. Computational power gives us the ability to use more powerful algorithms. Data is the fuel that allows us to make inferences that are used to train AI models. And the number of connected devices we have also feeds into the amount of data that we have. So all of these are extremely interconnected. So when we're thinking about the evolution of AI as a city, we want to think about it in four main phases. Number one, the most rudimentary, small town vibes. We want to think about this from around the 1970s to around the 1990s. And what I mean by this is actually a metaphor for the sophistication of AI technology. The next phase is a growing city that's growing into adolescence. The third is a mature, bustling metropolis. And the final one is the cognitive city, the city of the future, where AI agents are dominating all aspects of life. We're going to get into exactly what that means shortly. So when we're talking about the explosion of those three AI enablers that we talked about just a moment ago, let's visualize how much they've actually exploded from those 1970s and 1990s in the early small town vibes of the AI chronology to where they are today. Looking number one at the growth of compute power. When we're looking at supercomputers, don't worry about the metric here, about the exact unit. But when we're considering how powerful supercomputers are compared to where they have been, clear exponential improvement. And when we're looking at commercially available cloud computing, we're talking about like Google Cloud or AWS or Azure, didn't even exist before the 2000s essentially, and now we're seeing the exponential improvement of the volume of computing power and also the magnitude of computing power. Okay, what's the next one? Connected users. 1970s to 1990s, the internet was not even really a thing. 1990s come in and slowly some people are starting to get online, still in the hundreds of millions. Impressive, exponential compared to what was before it, but you look at the 2000s, 2010s, the only thing that's slowing down the exponential rise in connected users is that most people in the world are already online at this point. So there's only so many people more that could become integrated into the global internet community. And so what we have, which is not slowing down, is the explosion of connected devices. Now, we might be running out of people to bring into the internet, but each individual person that we're bringing in is bringing multiple devices. I have a laptop, I have multiple devices myself, and I'm sure most of the people watching this probably have a few different internet devices that are connected. Now, all of this data is conspiring together to create a ridiculous amount of data that has never before been seen. All of that is empowered by the ability for us to compute more readily. It's empowered by the number of connected devices that we have and the number of people that are connected to the internet. All of these things, they don't add to one another, they multiply, which is what explains the exponentiality of this data growth. Again, the units are so ridiculously large, it's hard for us to grasp. But a zettabyte is 1 trillion gigabytes, right? So we're talking about numbers that have so many zeros, we can't even keep track of them. And so with all of these things conspiring together, the number of users, the number of connected devices, the power of the compute that's available, and the amount of data that's collectively available, this also feeds into the amount of data that we can feed into sophisticated AI models that are more capable than ever before to think autonomously and intelligently and in a way that reflects the real world. And so when we're looking at the 4 phases of the AI explosion, when viewed from the perspective of urban development of cities, let's break that down and think about what the use cases are, what that means for businesses, and how those slow, gradual phases at first have exploded into exponentiality. And finally, what that exponentiality means for your business and what you should do about it so that you don't fall behind. So let's roll back the tape, right? Let's look at the olden days, small town vibes, 1970s to 1990s. For what it's worth, some of the most sophisticated AI models that we have today, neural network algorithms, they existed back in the 1970s. The academic papers that explained how neural networks could be used in order to solve complex problems, they existed, but they didn't have the ability to actually function. Computing power was extremely limited. The amount of data that you could train an AI model on, even a neural network, extremely limited. And so just like a small town back in the day could think about grand infrastructure and advanced telecommunication systems and bridges and high-rise buildings, they might have the blueprints for a skyscraper, but they don't have the money for a skyscraper. They don't have the people to populate a high-rise building. They don't have the resources like concrete and advanced electronics that are needed to build the skyscrapers that we think of when we look at the New York skyline. And in that same way, AI had the theoretical basis in the 1970s, but it didn't have the functional resources to actually take root as we've seen it recently. These were the computers that only the most advanced scientific establishments in the world had access to. We're talking about military, we're talking about some universities and not throughout the entire university, specific departments. We're talking about things like the IBM Advanced Research Lab in upstate New York. Areas that were generally not accessible or useful to the broad public. Compute power was limited. Data was not even collected in digital format for the most part. And we're talking about like handwritten data collection. We're talking about file cabinets. So the capacity wasn't really there back in the olden days. Nevertheless, there were some AI, what we could loosely call AI algorithms that were being used. We're talking about linear regression. This is like really generally simple algorithms that if you had a small data set, something that could fit into a small Excel file, you'd be able to compute. So these kinds of algorithms existed, but they were so simple and they did not require a massive amount of data, and they're nothing like ChatGPT or the large language models that we have today. And so the business impact was you'd be able to predict things like how much inventory are we going to have at the end of the month if people continue to purchase from us at the pace that they're purchasing. Given the prices of previous sales for our lemonade stand, how much should we price lemonade in the future in order to maximize our revenue in the future? So really relatively simple problems, impactful compared to the competition then, but nothing like what we have today. And so the next phase of this was AI as an early growing city, right? So now you have some simple infrastructure, you might have a couple of drawbridges, and you have a little bit more capacity. Now, more people are joining the internet, although it might have been that annoying dial-up with the modem sound when you logged into AOL. Now you started to have more IoT devices, sensors, tools in the world around us, in the physical world around us, that we're collecting data and then feeding that into databases. Again, super primitive compared to what we have now, but useful. And so the algorithms that were made available for businesses became a little bit more sophisticated. You had things like decision trees and random forests, which were the aggregation of hundreds or thousands of decision trees averaged together. You had clustering algorithms and support vector machines. These are impressive AI tools, but again, they don't compare to what we have in 2024, but extremely, extremely powerful compared to everything that was preceding them. And so the business impact at this time was AI became useful for making data-driven decisions. If you were a CEO, you're an executive, and you want to think strategically about which direction to grow your business, you don't just make random gut instinctual moves, you rely on data. And this is where the rise of data science as supposedly the sexiest job of the 21st century really came to prominence. In the late 2000s, early 2010s, and that's what we're going to get to next. Early 2010s, we're talking about the bustling metropolis of AI. Now we're thinking about a skyline equivalent worth of technology. When we're thinking about a city as an analogy for artificial intelligence, we're thinking about massive infrastructure. We're thinking about major interconnected networks of telecommunications where millions of people are able to connect with one another, are able to transport themselves and goods around the city in order to create exponential change and also exponentially spontaneous experiences. All of that happens with a high level of randomness and structure that's available with a tremendous amount of infrastructure. And so when we're thinking about what infrastructure is relevant, it's those enablers in the AI space. It's the compute power, where now we have the rise of graphical processing units, tensor processing units, massive availability of cloud computing, such as AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, and so forth. You have data availability. Now this is the rise of Facebook and social media platforms that are collecting tremendous amounts of data about us. Even government agencies, they're collecting data through not only the traditional census, but through all of the records that you have at your DMV, through major services that are offered by governments, where those services are now captured and stored in federal or government level databases. You have the availability of data through open data platforms. New York City is famous for making its data public so that people can analyze it and recommend policy recommendations. Now, the number of connected devices also is surging. So many devices, whether it's your Ring that monitors whether people are knocking on your door, whether it is sensors that allow for smart homes, whether it is surveillance technology that is rolled out on an industrial scale across cities and across government and business infrastructure, the number of physical tools connected to the internet is exponentially increasing, right? We even think about even the early Teslas are making their advent at this time, and now you have driverless vehicles or the early version of that, all collecting data, being trained on that data, and moving through the world with algorithms that are at the bleeding edge for the 2010s. And so now we're really seeing the abundance of deep learning. We're seeing the early stages of generative AI. At this point, natural language processing has borrowed the best that it could from traditional linguistics, and we're seeing the early chatbots. And of course, predictive analytics and all the tools that we talked about earlier, such as the regression models and the clustering and the support vector machines, these are reaching true maturity in their respective areas. We're looking at AI-enabled image recognition, speech recognition. These are what we call transfer learning models, where you have deep learning, right, over here. You have deep learning neural networks, and they're trained on massive corpuses of data, and then that composite of intuitions is made commercially available for every which developer through an API or through a simple tool, so that not everybody has to train their own AI model from scratch. We're able to borrow from the infrastructure that's been made available by the big players in the game. And so the business impact here, we're starting to see recommendation engines. We're seeing where any website you go to where you've made some kind of a transaction, whether it's Amazon and you've indicated a previous purchase, and it tells you based on your interest in these products, we recommend you buy these products as well. You go on Netflix, you see one movie that you like, you watch the whole thing, Netflix takes note of that, it recommends similar titles that you're probably going to enjoy also. And these companies that are taking advantage of it, they are the tech first companies. They are making absolute billions of dollars and dominating industries and transforming their industries. They're transforming the politics around regulating their industries, and they're changing the world. They're making money hand over fist. So now we are entering the 2020s. This is the phase where we are dead center of right now. We're talking about artificial intelligence that develops itself, where AI agents are adding levels of capacity and complexity that we've quite frankly never seen before, where the AI writes itself. And when we were thinking earlier about the number of internet connected devices and internet connected people, forget about devices where you might have a phone or a laptop. Now we're talking about individual AI agents that are acting as if they were a person, and they have the ability to make decisions similar to a person, maybe even legally, and they can write themselves. So now each person might have 50, 100, 1,000 AI agents working for them. And if you're a business, it's probably exponentially more. And so what's allowing this again, this may not be too far from now. What's allowing this is tremendous amount of compute power. We saw the exponential charts, right? That hockey stick all the way at the end, where the amount of compute that's made available commercially through cloud computing platforms such as AWS is just absolutely mind-boggling, and it's affordable where anybody can really access it. The amount of data that's available from so many sources, so much of it is free to use, and so much of it is available through organizations like data brokers, through APIs, through accessing social media platforms. Whether you're paying for it or whether you're collecting it yourself or through your business, the amount of data that you can utilize in order to develop proprietary AI algorithms is extremely, extremely abundant. And quite frankly, if you are a business that has a valuable set of data, you should be using that in order to create AI tools that no one else can create because they don't have the data that you have. And that is something that's worth considering. The number of connected devices, again, we talked about this, and we haven't even considered the number of AI agents that is exponentially more than the 75 billion number of connected devices. So the use cases that this is allowing for, we are all at this point familiar with the power of large language models, but now what is the bleeding edge in like this part of 2024, last half of the year, is AI agents that are developed on the basis of large language models, where you use LLMs as a cognitive tool and then you stratify. You allow not just one LLM to serve you, but you develop multiple LLMs in parallel, and they're all working together as a team, as a swarm, such as OpenAI would call it, in order to serve multiple functions and build on one another's capacities, right? In the same way, if you have a lemonade stand, you might have someone who stirs the drinks, another one who's managing the cash register, another one who's marketing your platform, another one who's responsible for inventory. All of these are tools that are made available in the form of AI agents, where they all have specialized responsibilities, and quite frankly, many of them can perform human-ready jobs better than the humans can. And so not only do we have these agents, but they even improve themselves. And so at this point, if you're a business and you're not taking full advantage of AI and considering AI agents to automate much of what your people are doing, you are not thinking ahead and you are at risk of falling behind. And the business impact of this is extremely, extremely sensitive, because when everyone is adopting AI, when everyone is adopting the latest tech, everyone in your industry is moving forward. If you're staying the same, you are falling behind. The world is not going to hold on and wait for you to catch up if you are not aggressively innovating yourself. And so it's so important for you to think about what unique advantages do you have? What insulation, what moats do you have that fortify your business? What are you best at? And how can you abstract that unique value add that you offer to your customers and your clients so that you can do it better with AI? You automate parts of it, but you don't lose the essence of your company's spirit and personality. And so let's look at bringing it all together, right? If you want your business to move forward, what you want to do to integrate AI is to take advantage, number one, of decision making with massive amounts of data. You want to consider the kinds of decisions that can be automated or enhanced by drawing massive amounts of data together, data that's within your company and data that you're pulling in from a series of external sources, and you're making automated decisions. You're using that to better understand your market, your customers, probably what the competition is doing, and get a leg up compared to what others are thinking about. And then finally, once you've figured out a way to manually do it, automate it, automate it, automate it. And then you execute those automated capacities to connected devices and to your team so that you can move much, much more quickly. Now, if you are a business owner, you are a leader in a company that needs to move forward with AI, you have 3 steps. What we can do is we can work with you. New York Strategy can help you to assess your preparedness for artificial intelligence. What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What data do you have access to? And what decisions should you be making and automating with AI? And we develop a tailored, uniquely customized strategy for you and your team. And as we execute that, we begin to implement, optimize, and then grow that out so that not only are you developing and implementing AI today, but you are future-proofing yourself with a long-term sustainable strategy. We've talked about the PRISM framework in a previous video that was dedicated to it. But the PRISM framework is the unique approach that New York Strategy uses in order to maximize success and avoid all of the common pitfalls that other companies fall into when they're thinking about AI as a gimmick, as something less than the holistic strategy that it deserves to be considered. And they're not thinking about the precursors and the implementation after effects that are necessary in order to make it a successful project. 98% of AI projects fail to reach their full potential, and we represent the 2% of businesses that are most successful. Again, we've worked with Fortune 500 companies implementing AI at massive, massive scales, worked with high growth startups, worked with Meta. So reach out, leave a comment, talk to us about what kind of unique challenges you are facing and what questions you have about how AI can move your business forward. If you found this useful, subscribe. We're going to come up with more content that explains where AI is, what its ramifications are today and in the future, specifically for business leaders that cannot afford to fall behind in the exponential age of artificial intelligence. Peace.